Welcome to Trulyfit, the online fitness marketplace connecting pros and clients through unique fitness business software.
Just like that. So, how well rested are you?
I am pretty well rested, but you can hear my voice is lost because I went to a concert last night. So I for the first concert, or really the first event I think I've been to post baby. She's 8 months old yesterday, and, so I enjoyed myself at a concert. Actually, it was funny. There was so many like 15 and 16-year-olds at this concert, and I just had to ask. I was like, "How do you know this band?" And they're like, "Oh, it's my dad's favorite band or my mom's favorite band." So now I'm officially like that old where I'm going to concerts of bands that I like, where the kids are going because their parents like the band. So that happened.
That's funny.
Welcome to the other side.
Yeah. Welcome.
What's cool about music now, though, that was not the case when we were coming up, and really even as recently as like 10 years ago, is that when you're listening to a playlist or a style, say on Spotify or Pandora or whatever, you're going to hear music from the 1920s to the 2020s. It's all going to get mixed together. And so it's so interesting to encounter youngsters. I'll go right ahead and say it.
Yeah.
That are just wide open in terms of eras and genres. They get to hear everything, and then they hear what they like, and they get turned on to it, and they go find more of it. So there's so much more crossover because of the way the platforms have changed. Radio was very restrictive once upon a time, and you got to hear what was current, and that was about it. And then there's formats over here for this and formats over here for that. And none of that really exists on contemporary streaming.
It's so true. I never,
so
and to add to that, Jane, I didn't even think, thinking about the radio concept, you were afraid at some point to change your radio station to miss one of the potential songs that you liked. So you didn't even really toggle between radio stations that much at a certain point, let's say 20, 30 years ago. But now it's like, it doesn't matter because all the music is on demand, so you can listen to anything at any time. And I think you're right, that certainly changes the for a good in a good way. I believe it's good. I'm sure that these kids get to listen to whatever it is that they want.
Just go down the rabbit hole.
And you know what I'm gonna chime in? Kind of like the exercise thing when people say, ooh, I've got a new exercise, and people think, ooh, I've got this new sound of music, and really along the whole cycle of years, everything kind of ends up repeating itself in some way, shape, or form, or blending things. I don't know. That's my view of it.
Yeah, certainly. So what's going on at CustomFit? Yeah, give us an update. How has everything been sort of like during this COVID transition since the last time we talked? How has business been? How have you maybe transitioned and taking new steps to do virtual stuff? Just give us an update.
Well, we're exploding right now, which is amazing.
In person.
Great.
To what? In person.
In person. Yeah.
And it forced us to be okay with the Zoom and FaceTime, which we didn't feel was as personal, but hey, it's working. And there is probably maybe a couple of people that are still wanting to do that, whether it's because they've moved or they just like to have one day at home and one day in the studio. So it's given us a big platform in that sake.
We also have, everybody disappeared. Where'd everybody go? There you are. Okay. We also have ample opportunity to develop some online programming based on programming that we've already performed live a number of times. So we're in the development phase. We talked a little bit about that and what platforms you have experience with, Steve. So we're on our way to getting things produced. And of course, there's so much background learning to do in terms of production values and developing targeted sales lists and so forth. So we're getting into that realm, and we'll see where that takes us on a step-by-step basis. I think we want to be sure that the things that we put out there have the same kind of integrity that we deliver in person, and that continue to set us apart from all the other noise and all the other traffic and all the other jingly jangly stuff that's out there. So small steps, but we'll get there. And certainly, having the experience we've had for the last couple of years with working with people online, we're a lot more comfortable with that whole thing.
Yeah, certainly much different. As we know, you can't walk around the person in sort of a 360 manner and see everything that's going on. You lose that personal one-on-one touch, that connection with your client. It is personal training for a reason, but what can we do if there's no other options and it's better off for some people? For a while, Jane and Brigitte, I said I wouldn't do it. I was not going to virtual train people. And then I had clients reach out, and it wasn't about me. They couldn't find a good trainer in person wherever they were, right? They couldn't find somebody that they could go to. So they said, Steve, I know that you don't believe that you're 100% of your skill set doing it virtually, but 80% of you knowing me, knowing my body, having worked with me before is better than 100% of someone else who I have to start over with. And I just had to eat my ego and say, you're right, I am limited in this modality, but if this is what the client wants, I'm going to give it to them.
You spoiled them. It's all on you.
Well, and also, Steve, to add to that, if you already have an existing client and they claim they have this at home or that at home, or they can't do this because of that, and when you get your eyes on where they say they're working out or attempting to do something, and you can go, wow, did you look at that area over there? Or they didn't really explain it, maybe like they thought they should have, and then you're finding a new way. And I look at it as they're rehearsing in their house. So then when they're not with you, it makes it easier for them to do their home exercises.
Yeah, it's sort of like an audit of what they're doing and what their home is from our perspective, and say, hey, I know you're putting that band around that, but actually it's safer around the bedpost because it's not going to slide up off. Or, hey, I know you're doing lunges there, but watch out for the couch. You can do lunges over there instead. I never thought of it that way, but you're right. It's beneficial for them.
Yeah.
So today we're going to expand on the FMS screen. I touched on this really briefly, almost accidentally, with Eric Diagati, who uses it with some of his athletes. And I didn't really go down the rabbit hole of asking him all his questions. So I'm having both Jane and Brigitte on to sort of explain what the FMS screen is. I know a lot of personal trainers heard about it. They understand what screens are from a general perspective. But can you give me a definition of what FMS is, and then who it's under, if it's under any of the major sort of corporations?
Well, FMS stands for Functional Movement Screen. And it comes out of a paradigm that really started almost all of the standard fitness assessments that we do back in the Reebok fitness days. When Reebok was a significant leader in programming and tools for training. There's a physical therapist and athletic trainer by the name of Ray Cook, who was very involved in those early days, I'm talking about the 1980s, of developing standardized fitness assessments. And what blossomed from there with Gray's research and with his involvement in different professional athletic organizations, he was instrumental in developing the Titleist Performance Institute, and then also the Functional Movement Screen. So it's all kind of born out of this effort to see where people are and work with them where they are, but also give them a sense of whether or not they have a high risk level. So particularly in athletics, Gray Cook wrote the book Athletic Bodies in Balance. And a colleague of mine was really turned on by that book and introduced us to the principles there. And that was the beginnings of the functional movement screen as we know it now. Some of the testing and the corrective exercises that were called for in that publication that Gray Cook authored. He used strings and masking tape and dowels and tools that we all have readily available, and then eventually designed a kit. And you can see that behind me with the little FMS logo on there, the FMS screening kit. And that's one level of screening and assessment that FMS offers now. They offer an additional level of professional screening and assessment for physical therapists and physicians and chiropractors. And it's terrific to have that platform to work within and to find like-minded chiropractors and physical therapists and orthopedists who are familiar with the system and to be able to speak the same language about someone's capabilities or where they have room for improvement. So we can work together, hand in glove, on helping someone improve the quality of their movement, as well as, the frequency of their movement. So a big part of the philosophy of the functional movement screen is to move better first, and then move more. Improve the structure before you start running cars over it, right? So make sure that things are moving well without a load, and then load up and intensify. So for that reason, it's really effective to use on any population. It was originally designed for athletes and very high performance, but it can be used with anyone to get a feel for where there might be imbalances and where there might be areas where you need to call on a physical therapist or an orthopedist or a chiropractor or somebody with more advanced skills for pain reduction and good quality function. And then we can work from there on improving performance.
Walk me through your client experience. Brigitte, you can start if you want. Steve walks in, Custom Fit, heard great things, guys, want to work with you. Amazing gym you have here. And I signed the health history form. We go through everything. I pay you oodles of money because you deserve it. And then you say, hey, Steve, we're going to do an FMS screen today. What does it look like? What are the first steps?
Well, we do begin with a posture screening. So we take a still shot, basically have them stand against a grid. And I always tell people that, of course, when they're being looked at, they try to stand in the best alignment. But then when we move to the functional movement screening, their body's in motion. So it's hard for them to fake it or try to correct anything. And I personally want that client to turn away from the mirror. So I would have you face the wall so you can't look and correct yourself. So as we begin the functional movement screening, I explain there's, as you see behind Jane, there's this nice board. It looks a little intimidating and you hold a dowel in certain positions. We have 7 movement patterns that we go through. And then I explain the grading scale, if you will. And that's always interesting because the minute you say 0, 1, 2, or 3, they always go, oh gosh, I don't want to be a 0. But the other challenge with that is I have to explain if you feel any pain, and pain doesn't have to be like, oh gosh, I'm in pain. It could be just an awareness of something that would make it go to a 0. So we have to work really hard at making you feel like this is not a representation of your character or something's wrong with you. But we try our best to be just as, here's the movement. For instance, the first one is a deep squat. Most people know what a squat is. So I walk you through how to set up properly for the deep squat. Number one would be the best posture. Make the tallest version of Steve. So we hold the dowel over our head, and then we position your feet, and we go through step by step. We give you 3 attempts to do your squat, and the best of the 3 is what we take. Meanwhile, I'm walking around you and saying, squat slow, do it the best that you can. The second one is your hurdle step. No, inline lunge or hurdle step. Jane, there it is. Hurdle step. But either way, there's 7 movement patterns. And so each one, we go through and set you up as if you have no idea what you're doing, even if you know what you're doing. So we're trying to really embrace the set you up, get you in the best posture, give you 3 chances to do the best move. And of course, anytime someone knows that someone's looking at them while they're being tested, they're very nervous. So we try not to fill you up with too many words like I do, but just do the movement. Let's get the best version of you. Sometimes if you can't execute the movement properly, then we just take what we can. For instance, one of them is an inline lunge, and you literally stand on that board like you're on a balance beam, which is pretty scary. So then we just tell them to straddle the box. We just try to get them in the best position so that even if they can't do it according to how they're supposed to do it to get tested, we just move them and just see how they look. Whether a knee is moving in or out, whether the shoulders are dipping to the right or left. It really is pretty amazing. Even with a very athletic person, we all have our tendencies of compensating.
Jane, can you speak to the grading system? Steve goes into this squat, which Brigitte said was exercise 1 of the 7. His left foot starts turning out. His pelvis is out of whack. Everything's falling forward. Explain what sort of grade I would get and how you use that grade moving forward.
It sounds as if you've been through this before. So there are very specific guidelines for what the highest quality or optimal movement pattern is. And that's a 3 if you meet all of those guidelines. There's a certain alignment of the dowel over your head. There's no imbalance from your right to left side across your shoulders, across your hips. The knees stay in line with your ankles at the bottom of the movement. The thigh goes below parallel to the floor in the movement. So it is, in fact, a deeper squat than people think you would use in exercise. And again, this is an assessment. So you're looking for very particular standards in an assessment that you may or may not apply to loaded exercise. So if there's any compensations, any imbalances that are apparent in those first 3 attempts at that movement, there's a way of, in that movement pattern, in the deep squats, not true for all of the movement patterns, but in the deep squat pattern, we can take the compensation by putting the FMX box, which is basically a 2x4, putting that 2x4 under your heels, and then looking again at the quality of your movement pattern. And if you are clean in your movement pattern with your heels elevated, all it really does is takes your calves out of the equation. If you have any kind of limitation in your dorsiflexion, that's going to inhibit the way your knees move, which is going to inhibit the way your hips move, and so on up the movement chain. So if you have a clean movement pattern with the heels elevated, boom, you score a 2. If you have an imbalanced movement pattern or a compensation with the heels elevated, it's a score of 1, whatever that imbalance is. And we make very careful notes about what those imbalances are. Mm-hmm. We want to look at all of the movement patterns, all of the imbalances that present themselves before we draw a whole lot of conclusions about how to address those problems. It may be and upper body in coordination that's affecting the way that your balance works below the waist. It could be a lower body imbalance, a surgery, a prior injury that affects the way the whole movement chain works. It could be a problem with your core, and having a weak core all the way around the trunk, not just the front. But having a weak core can cause some pretty significant imbalances if your upper and lower body aren't communicating with each other very well. So making sure that those firing sequences are happening properly in all of the movement patterns is pretty critical to drawing any kind of conclusion about where to go next.
I think the statement you made earlier, Jane, about having a parlance that you can use amongst all of these fitness professionals that is shared is very important, right? Because I can do my own assessment that is similar to this, but it's not that helpful if I pass it on to someone else and just give them like 4 pages of notes of what's going on, right? They don't have the time to read that with my client. But if I say, hey, they scored a 2 in the squat because of lack of ankle mobility, then that's easier, so sort of transferable information to the physical therapist, who can then, decipher what else is going to, take the next step sort of in their whatever prescription they have in exercise to get them better. And I always struggle personally, although I'm a corrective exercise specialist, which is just passing a test. It doesn't mean anything. I always struggled trying to play what I call anatomical sleuth. Is it the ankle causing the knee and hip issue, or is it the hip causing the ankle and knee issue? Who the hell knows where it starts? I don't know where it is on the chain. And sometimes, like you said, you have to refer that up the ladder to maybe somebody who's better at that. But having this sort of test, I think, is really great, so that you can do the baseline work and then pass that on to someone else if it is above our pay grade. Brigitte, I was going to ask you next, how often, and you can both answer this because trainers work in different fashions, right? We're not all robots. How often will you repeat an FMS screen or go back through some of these things with the client because you want to see if they've made any progress during your training?
Well, a lot of times after you've done the test, we call those highlighted areas that we're going to really work on, even though you might score a 2 on some of them. But if there's some drastic imbalances, I will pick and choose certain ones. And then it is intriguing even to the client. So they will be like, well, can we do this sooner? Sometimes it would be 3 months, sometimes 6 months. It could be up to a year. Some people could really care less. But I think that what you said before, it is very intriguing even to the person if you don't know, is the imbalance coming from your knee, your ankle? And sometimes once you make the client aware, then they start cycling through their head going, oh, it's not necessarily the exercise I'm doing. It could be something I'm doing at home. Maybe it's a gardening or something that I'm in this position a lot. So then that in itself is just self-awareness, making a correction. But, to answer your question directly, Jane, you can help me out with this. I believe it is a 3 to 6 month repetitive, if you want to just keep checking it. But I think standards, you could say a year.
I think the standards have changed over time. When I first was introduced to the functional movement screen, the recommendation was to wait 8 weeks before doing a complete rescreen. Now, having been exposed to a number of FMS workshops through idea conferences and so forth, I'll say if you see progress in a movement pattern on any given day, test it. Just go ahead and test it. Do corrective patterns and see if it makes a difference in the score right then and there. So you can be very flexible. A lot depends on your client's goals,
Sure.
like everything else.
Yeah.
It depends on how much feedback and how much progress they're aiming for. And of course, if you're already scoring a 2 on most things, then you have good function. That's considered a functional score. And people want to build on their function. So it's when we have those scores of 1 or 0, getting out of pain obviously is progress. And then getting imbalances fixed is something that people really do want to look at with more frequency. So you can take it any which way you want, basically. Make it work for you, make it work for your client.
Yeah, I think pain is a big factor. If someone obviously is in pain in any amount and they start noticing, hey, this is feeling better. Some people don't even realize that they could possibly feel better until they start feeling better. And then they're realizing, wow, this corrective exercise or just paying attention to my alignment can make such a big difference. Some people just don't know what they don't know. All of us have been through that. We just live our lives. And then once we're aware of something, then it can be dialed into and corrected or improved upon.
Jane, I'm going to ask you to play devil's advocate a little bit here. I know you've been a part of the FMS screen for a while, as you've explained, and you know the intricacies. But tell us something that you don't like about the FMS screen, or if Jane was ahead of the functional movement screen pattern, what would she add to it or take away from it?
You sent me this in the list of questions, and I've been actually trying to think of something that I don't like about it. Honestly, I haven't been able to come up with anything.
That's a great answer.
And which is great. It's a great thing to be able to say. It was impressed upon me the very first time that I went to the FMS Level 1 certification workshop. And this would have been, I think, somewhere around 2006, 2007 maybe. The aha moments happened so fast and so frequently in terms of putting the pieces together with mobility, stability, strength, performance, and all of the ways that any deficiency in any one of those areas can express themselves. And really, ever since then, I've been a ridiculously huge fan. So I'd like to play devil's advocate on this one. But they've only gotten better. One of the interesting parts of the functional movement organization, and I think I mentioned before, Greg Cook started it all off with a lot of research. And they continue to do a lot of research. So they changed one of the movement patterns. Which you wouldn't think if you're developing an industry-wide or cross-industry, for that matter, standard of practice, that you wouldn't see that very often. But they found that in the rotational stability test pattern, they were getting too many functional scores with dysfunctional people. And that sounds kind of weird, doesn't it? And I don't mean that in a psychological manner. But that the trainers and the therapists knew that something was imbalanced, and yet people were routinely scoring functionally. So they dialed in on a more, I'll call it a more intensive movement pattern. It was very difficult to achieve a score of 3 in the original version of the rotation stability pattern. And now it's a little more difficult to achieve a score of 2. If there's an imbalance across the body, because most of the body movement patterns rely on a diagonal balance from upper to lower, if there's any imbalance there, it's going to show up in that pattern. Much more effectively than it did before. So they rolled that out in 2020. I think it was 2020. And so actually, we've been doing the old pattern so long we have to constantly remind ourselves to do the new one. So so kudos to any organization that gets that constant feedback from users. They're getting feedback from the trainers who are members of the functional movement organization and working on improving things all the time. So, and they have been very consistent about improving the corrective pattern access that we have. So, so having access to videos and illustrations and guidelines that we can share with clients on a regular basis is a big bonus. It's hard to remember a lot of exercises, but particularly corrective exercises where you want to draw a lot of attention to your pelvic stability, your scapular stability, your core firing, all of that kind of stuff. It gets a little crazy in the client's head. So,
and they even added, since I've been doing this, they, besides correcting or making an adjustment to the rotational stability with the clearance tests, they added the ankle mobility. Is that true too? Yeah. So that was, they dialed in a little bit more on how your ankle flexion is. Because just like you said, Steve, is it coming from the ground up, or is it coming from the knee or the hip down? So those are always the clearance test portion is, I think it just makes it a little bit more specific to when you are looking at some of the movement patterns. And it helps you see the person a little bit better with, is this movement coming from here? Plus, when you're in the midst of the test, amazing conversations come out where I had a client say, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you I fell out of a window when I was younger. And I went, oh, okay. So that might affect a little bit of what's going on here. Because again, people don't tell you everything. Their body can tell a good bit when they're moving. But then when there's the classic events in their life that can tell you a lot about why something is compensating.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like you said, no matter how much we push our clients in these consultations, I've told the story on this podcast before. I had a client I worked with for a year, and then she like somehow slipped in the conversation that she had a heart attack 2 years ago. I'm like, that wasn't on your health history form. Like, I need to know that. So it's, the fact that you can read their body and assess, then you can continue to interrogate them and ask them the question. And I just want to add, Brigitte, you sort of mentioned this before. We're talking about all the science behind this, which is great. But, I find it, as you guys are talking about this, great from a motivational standpoint, because too many of our clients are worried about what I would call dumb metrics. They want to step on the scale every day, right? They want to know what, how much weight they can dumbbell chest press or something, right? And,
right.
and we can't stop people from being concerned with metrics because it's just in our human nature. But this is a good metric to be concerned with, right? So like Brigitte said, you might put your client and they scored a 1, and their goal is to say, hey, I want to work on, making sure that my inline lunge or whatever it is a little bit better. Can we do these sorts of things? Because I'm concerned with my mobility, not my weight necessarily all the time. And I think having any additional metric that is what I would consider a healthy goal is a great thing.
Right. I have a good bit of people that either walk or run outside of fitness. And, again, they put that little comment of, oh, my ankle's been hurting. Well, we go back and we look and we realize, okay, this part of the assessment pointed to your ankle or pointed to things. And so it kind of helps them motivate where, unfortunately, sometimes they have to stop running or walking or back way off, where then their brain starts thinking, oh, great, I'm doomed. And so it gives you a little more incentive once they start realizing you're on their team, you're going to help them get through this movement. And that's the purpose of this test. And you can feel improvement, not necessarily, say, oh, I see you move this much more. But once they start feeling different, bingo, you have made a point.
Yeah, the most important thing that we can get, the most important piece of information that we get from any assessment process is, what's the risk of injury? How do we avoid injuring this client? Because moving more is risky. So how do we assess the risk that's in this body at this time. And that's kind of where the magic is. We can open people's eyes to where they have a higher level of risk and reduce it. So we want to make sure that we're designing the exercise programs, even beyond corrective exercises, that we're designing programs that minimize that risk and maximize their strengths.
If I'm a personal trainer and I come to Custom Fit and I say, I love what you guys do. I'm a new personal trainer. I want to work at Custom Fit. I imagine you take an interest in maybe teaching them the FMS screen, right? You're going to say, hey, listen, we use this here. We talk about this. We need to teach this to you. What is your pitch to them? What exactly are you saying to that young personal trainer, why they need to learn these things and understand these things?
Okay, I'll answer.
And then I'll tell you my version next.
A lot of what we already talked about. It's hard to deny that one of the greatest things that we can do for people is help them to avoid injury. And I think the medical ethos of, at the very least, do no harm certainly comes into play. If you're certified by any reasonable certification organization, that's part of your mission statement. And this goes a long way to taking your skills to the next level and also elevating that mission statement. It elevates the level of service that you can provide when you can start with a really clear roadmap. What is this person's body and physicality saying to you in terms of what they need? And what steps can you take to deliver it? So it's not just all about finding out what their 1 rep max is. It's about improving the quality of each and every movement, whatever it is, wherever they go, whatever their preferences are, whatever their favorite sport is. How do you keep them in balance and enjoying being in their body for life? That's what the FMS can offer. Brigette's words.
I think that if I had a trainer come in, which we have had, if you give them the opportunity to take the FMS, we deliver it to them, then they are very much interested and understand it. So then, because some people are a little bit like, oh, here we go, another assessment. But I think once they feel the difference of and understand the difference of how that can maneuver them through workouts and make everything a little bit better, because most people just want to come in and work out and push the heavy weights. And I'm all about pushing, but at the same time, most of the people are either already injured. So that speaks a good language to them, that whole safety. But we, again, make the trainer have the assessment on them, and then they can better understand it. And then we go through a couple of times where either Jane and myself will shadow them while they're doing an assessment, or they do the assessment and then they come back to us and then we discuss it, because I think that is a really good learning tool. Just like anything else, when you're not used to something, if you're delivering it, you start to understand it better when you get your hands on it and you begin to repeat it. And then I think you have a different respect from your clients. Your clients know that, okay, they're not just, like you said, Steve, just get on the scale, just do this, just do that. This is a whole different level of, we are really on your side to help you age in your body better, and help you move overall better in your daily life.
Yeah, I love how you both saw that from the perspective of why it's beneficial for the client. Like this is what we do, right? We help our clients, but I think you could also, not that any trainer should be selfish in this regard, but you could also pitch it like, hey, you are getting another skill set that you can put on your resume, right? This is an additional thing that you have to not only share with your clients, but, again, put on your resume and show that you have a larger scale understanding of the body. Why would you not want to learn an additional thing about the body when your whole job is to know about the body?
I think that you mentioned something about your corrective exercise specialist certification and how that was just passing a test. And, you have to have a certain understanding in order to pass a test and a certain mindset in order to pass a test. But to bring that into application day after day and session after session with all kinds of different clients is certainly another thing altogether. And so the functional movement screen is very experiential. It's a certification and a very worthwhile program to dive into. That really just only grows for you in its use because you learn to see so much more. It's fascinating always to me, which is why I do this, to see how much people can carry around without being aware of imbalance and the impact that prior injuries and surgeries can have on the way they move. And people can work at a very high performance level with some pretty serious dysfunction in their joints and muscles. And still just keep going. To be able to find those easier and easier, to be able to fine tune the way you address and improve those things is great from both sides, from the client side and from the trainer side. It's great to be able to do that for people. It's great to be able to have that kind of a vision because people don't see that or feel that in themselves.
I like to always use the term of putting things in your toolbox, and from a perspective of trainers, I mean, the more tools in our toolbox per se to use to help for our clients is one way. But I also told the client, the more you have us looking at you a certain way, maybe they have a physical therapist, maybe they have a massage therapist, heck, maybe they just have another avenue. But I always think that the more vision you have, especially when you're dealing with the curiosity of it. I can't imagine someone not wanting to know more about their own body. But a trainer, for sure, it would definitely promote what they're already doing and refine what they're doing.
So it sounds like there is no reason not to get the FMS screen. People should be certified in it. If they're personal trainers, eventually at some point in their career, it's only beneficial. Talk a little bit about that process. Where do you go? Can you do this online? Do you have to have someone else certify you officially? How does that process work?
First, you go to functionalmovement.com.
And it has,
and there you can see all the different levels of education that are available. We do offer online programming. They had to, just like we all did.
Yeah.
But they have gone back to live in-person instruction. And so they frequently have weekend conferences in major cities around the country in order to do that. So I think the conference that I went to for my certification was in Boston. And just go. Make the investment and go.
Hypothetically, sorry to butt in here.
Yeah.
Let's say I don't have the time or the money right now, but Jane teaches me the skill set and I can go ahead and use that for a little while until I have the time and the money to, let's say, fly to Boston or take this course. Do you still think that's an effective way to go about this?
Well, I cannot lie. And I don't have to lie, which is great.
Because you taught me.
My entire staff that I worked with, when I got certified for FMS, everybody on our staff got certified from FMS. And this was before I moved to Savannah. I was still living in upstate New York.
Mhm.
And shout out to New York. Woo! So our entire staff bought in, and our fearless leader at Plaza Fitness, he reached out to the FMS crew,
Mhm.
the founders of that organization, and asked for their blessing for us to develop a program based almost entirely on FMS to kind of take the show on the road to universities with sports training degree programs, and kind of act as another arm of the FMS organization. And would you please recognize the certification that we provide to those students? And
They did.
Ray and Lee said yes. So we did that for a couple of years. We went to a few universities and conducted training programs, and conducted that same program with incoming trainers in our own facility. And that's the same training program that I still use in our facility.
Oh.
I still think it's extraordinarily beneficial to go and sit at the knee of the guys who developed nearly all of the basic assessments that anybody in this business in the United States is still using. and listen to them describe it, and sponge up the energy and the smarts that they bring to it. So we can take you through the basics, but it's invaluable to get the level of expertise that they bring to the table is extraordinary and entertaining. These guys are rock stars, and they're really fun. They're really fun to work with.
Yeah, I was going to add to that. I miss those things. I can't wait to go to some sort of fitness related event, and I take more from the presenters than I do from the information, if that makes sense, right? How they present, what's going on with them. You learn so much from these people who have been teaching in that sort of stage for a long time, and how they go about the process. So I miss it, and I can't wait to get back to some of those things. So I wanted to ask you, and you might have not thought about this, but are you guys ever going to come up with your own screen, another level of a screen? Is it worthwhile to develop like a functional movement screen 0.2 or something? Or do you think they do such a good job that it's just easier to follow in their footsteps?
Haven't thought of that, but I think that the one that we are using is perfect. But then again, the more bodies you take through it, sometimes there is that level of never thought of this movement might help that. But I mean, the 7 movements are pretty basic and take you through a pretty good eye about what each person does in their daily life or in an activity. It spells it out pretty well. So not on my end.
Jane, are there competitors to this? And if so, do you know any of them?
I honestly do not know if there are competitors in this kind of assessment.
I've never heard of competitors, unless people think that corrective exercise is a competitor. I don't really think so. They don't do a screen. They just understand the nuances of what's going on, but there is no screen involved. So
yeah,
I do know, sorry for interrupting you, Jane, that when you are looking up corrective exercises, if you don't have your little library, I remember you saying to me a lot, Jane, make sure it says the FMS, because there are the other ones that may not be as exact in their explanation. So I don't know what their they're just offsets of it. But yeah, just like any other trademark, the FMS, when you are looking it up for any specific exercise or just explanation of the testing.
Right. Corrective exercise is complementary to everything that we do. It's not enough to just do a screen. It's absolutely essential to have a series of movement patterns that help to, as the name effectively says, correct any imbalances or problems that arise. And there's certainly a whole bunch of different approaches to take with corrective exercises. You have to know the why of the movement. Why are you doing this or that? What is the ultimate benefit of that movement pattern, and how does it improve somebody's movement overall? A lot of corrective exercise patterns are kind of feeding into primal or primitive fitness disciplines. And there's been a pretty significant increase in those types of programs over the last, I'm going to say decade, really. You have GMB and primal and all kinds of other paradigms that address what we would call developmental types of movements, crawling, jumping, running, and all of the strength that's required to do all of those things really well. And that's all great, right? I don't have a problem with any of that. I think as long as it addresses the why and improves the quality of your movement, it's all good.
I wanted to ask both of you this because I think I've had this conversation with everyone who's been on the podcast. It's interesting to hear everyone's take, from the sports medicine doctors to just random personal trainers. It seems like we've had more injuries today than we've ever had before, right? The orthopedics are doing more surgeries. Sports medicine doctors and physical therapists are absolutely booked. And the science is supposed to be better. We should be having less injuries, but that doesn't seem to be the case. What is your take on that? Do you think the FMS screen, like Jane just mentioned, could help maybe prevent some of that, and that maybe training styles, I'm leading you down a road here, but that the training styles of other trainers are contributing to this, or I should say general population only focusing on heavy weights and moving in, just a few planes of motion?
That's such a big question.
Yeah.
Wow. Personally, I think that, and this is part of me going, I'm guilty of it too. Because I try to tell the client, we're going to do the perfect scenario. We're going to warm you up. We're going to prep your muscles, blah, blah, blah. We're going to cool down. We're going to stretch. And I think that our world is such a hurry, try to get everything in at once. And let's just get straight to the workout. Things are feeling better now. I don't need to do that anymore. Kind of like that toolbox theory, and getting your rest. I just think that people are not doing the full start to finish how they should on a regular basis. I'm not saying you have to do it a single time, but I think overall more and more people are kind of half-assed doing it.
I think that we see a lot of people who, and I'm not saying we, as in Brigitte and I and the trainers here at CustomFit, I'm saying in general. There are a lot of people in the world who rely on surgery as not a last resort, but a first resort. And that's unfortunate because invasive procedures are treated within your body, very similar to an injury. It's something that you carry around. It creates trauma. And those are the things that we have to then learn to work with. But it really changes the way your body works when there's an injury trauma or a surgery trauma. Sometimes there is no other way around addressing an injury than a surgery. But as somebody who specializes in movement, I'm always going to recommend movement as a first resort, as a first fix. Now, everybody in any specialty area who believes in what they do is going to recommend that thing that they do. And, that's reasonable enough, I suppose. But given the trauma that a surgery can create, my position is always to try everything else first. And there's so many things to try. If you are of the mindset to try those things. So besides medication and surgery, which change the global system of a body, you have movement therapy, you have water therapy, you have acupuncture, you have massage therapy, you have within massage therapy and sports therapy, you have muscle activation techniques and resistive stretching and scar tissue therapy and lymphatic drainage and rolfing and breath work. And then you get into physical therapy and those modalities. I mean, there's so many different ways to treat a body to heal itself before going under the knife. So are people getting injured more, or are they going to doctors more, or are they going to therapists more? I mean, if people are getting their pain addressed more often, less with painkillers and more with movement and treatment, that's kind of a good thing, right? And I would think that that's going to continue to happen more as people become more self-aware and more interested in the ways that they can feel better. So injuries do happen, even under the best of circumstances. So, people are tuned into it and now try to fix it.
Yeah, great perspective, both of you. I mean, I echo all those thoughts, and Jane, like you sort of mentioned, if you're a hammer, everything's a nail. If you're a surgeon, of course, if someone gets referred to you and you can do the surgery, you're going to say, let's do it. Right. So that's their specialty. So I think, that is, of course, a problem, but I'll also add to that just to sort of connect both of your points. And it seems like people over their lifetime, the arc of their, let's say, their physical prowess starts to go down as they get older. They don't change their routines. So when Brigitte is working with studs who are men in their typically 60s and 70s, she's not having them bench press every day and go on the leg press. She's having them go in the pool and do Pilates and move in all directions, right? And do these different things where we've now changed the exercise prescription based upon your age and your needs. And I think the general population, unfortunately, just through naivety, doesn't always know that. We've watched people in their 60s doing exercise routines that are something that a football player does in their 20s, right? And it's like, this isn't the modality for you anymore. This has to change. And I think, I don't know if the onus is on us as personal trainers. Of course it is a little bit, but I think we need some sort of education for the population, like Jane said, for just movement, right? We need to say, it's not just about the vanity and the lifting heavy weights and the sort of Arnold Schwarzenegger-esque prescription of lifting in these 4 to 6 rep ranges. We need movement. It doesn't matter what it is, yoga, basketball, ultimate frisbee. We need to get people moving rather than just lifting weights.
Bingo. I think that the education from a trainer to the client, and that's part of us exposing them more and more, because it is hard to change someone's mindset if that's all they've ever done, that's all they've ever known.
Or that they've never done. People don't know what they're missing if they've never really pushed themselves, really cleaned up their eating habits, or not fat, or there are all these variables that need to be addressed in order to get an optimal outcome from your exercise. And a lot of people are very, very stuck in the mindset that I can just do this one thing and my whole world will change. Well, maybe very short term, but not for the long haul. So yeah, that's definitely an education process, and that's an education process for any client of any age.
And that's difficult for us as trainers. I know that I can look back at, clients that I've trained, and I'm sure you can say the same thing. I'm not happy about it, but I might have worked with them for 2 or 3 or 4 years and there wasn't a lot of change. And it wasn't for any other reason than I work with them 2 hours a week and they were doing all the wrong things when they weren't with me. And what else can you do? If you're a personal trainer and you're working 45 hours a week and you have 20 clients and you have a life outside of there, I can't go to my client's home and make sure they're making all the right choices. So I think it is important to have those conversations on the front end with your client. And when you get to I'm going on a tangent a little bit, but you get to a certain point in your career, you guys are there where you can fire clients. When you're making enough money and you're doing the right thing, you have to say, I'm worried about your health and I'm investing time in you every day. I can't have you not listen to what I'm saying. I can't have you come in and do nothing outside of what we're doing because I'm wasting my time and my mental sort of bandwidth in trying to help you, and you're not helping yourself. And I think maybe that's ultimately what more trainers need to do, is keep their clients accountable from that perspective and say, hey, listen, this is a mutual goal we're working towards. I don't want you to just think that you're paying me for this hour and leaving. I'm not your nail tech. I'm sort of like your guide to health.
Interesting, Steve, that you would say that. Is and this is the classic. I will speak to someone and they tell me what they need. And I'm so about, okay, I want to hear what you're saying, but if that's all they dial into, I need this, I need balance, I need this, I want to lose this weight, but then they block when I start speaking. And I understand, yes, you're paying me, so I'm doing you a service. There's a fine line where, okay, you want me to just keep doing this, and then it becomes just not a very productive relationship. And it sounds like you're being a smart tail. How's it working for you? It's not really working real well, is it? So why don't we just try it this way? But yeah, it definitely becomes a pretty interesting psychology with your clients.
Kind of bringing it around to the FMS screen, for example, I can count on one hand, thankfully, probably just on 2 fingers, the number of clients who have absolutely no sense of value for the FMS screen and the corrective exercise patterns, because, like Brigitte said, they knew what they needed already. And that's all they wanted to do. And so there comes a point, for me, there's only, I can't control what anybody does in their everyday life. I feel fortunate enough to have what little control of my own life that I have. And even that is probably, kind of a false sense of security. So I come back to that sense of value, like Brigitte was saying, of what our expertise is. If you don't have a sense of value for the advice we're giving you, even if it's only within the time and space that we are together, then why are we together? It is okay to say no when that fit doesn't occur. When you're on your way up and struggling to pay the rent, that's a difficult thing to do. But it's almost always a worthwhile thing to do, even in the event that you're scraping, because ultimately it reflects on your energy and your mindset and your positivity and all of your other interactions.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. I couldn't echo those thoughts more. This has been a fantastic conversation. I'm so glad we got into some of these other questions, not just the FMS screen. So good to catch up with you guys. Brigitte, can you tell the listeners where they can find more about Custom Fit or you two individually, whether they can maybe reach out to you if they have questions concerning the FMS screen or something, or where they can find you as far as your social media is concerned?
Yes, we are on Facebook and we are on Instagram under Custom Fit, but we also, you can reach out to us, email www.customfitcenter.com. And that's a pretty simple way. And that usually goes straight to Jane. And then she kind of navigates where and who, where that goes from there.
But wait, we're also on the Twitter, and we're also on the next door, and that's under CustomFit Center.
We are all over that, aren't we?
We are.
I will put all the links below. Jane and Brigitte from Custom Fit, thank you so much for joining the Trulyfit Podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great to see